So speaking about ways of traveling, so we always, speak about our journeys and our trips, and we enjoy telling other people about where we went, what did we see, what did we do. But now we're going to be talking about how did we get there? How did we go to this place? What transport, did we take? Did we go by bus? Did we go by car or by train or by plane? So that's what we call mode of transport or ways of traveling. So, how did you go somewhere? How did you get there? So we know how to describe the place. We did that in the lesson before. But now we're going to talk about how did we get there? How did we get to this place? So if you have a look, we are here. We are talking about going to places. But how did we get there? So did you go by bike or by train or by car? So we use this verb to say go, and then we use this preposition, it's this word by. So go by, then you say which one? Did you go by bike, train, car? You can also say that you traveled by train, that you traveled by bus, you traveled by plane, or you traveled by boat. So you can use the verb travel to start your sentence, the action word, as I traveled on a plane, to Sydney. You can also say take. So this is a verb that we use when we take a taxi, we take an Uber, or we take a bus. So again, how did you get to work? How do you usually go to work? Well, I take a bus. Okay, so we use this verb, I take. You can say taxi, Uber, bus. The question is, how did you travel? Or how did you get there? So that's why we have these ways. You can talk to people about how did you get there. So that's called ways of traveling. Let's practice some sentences. I always something a taxi when I go out with friends in the evening. So what do you always do? I always take a taxi. Okay, when I go out in the evenings with my friend. So subject, I, we can use an adverb, always, or you could say sometimes or never, but I always take a taxi because we know we have to say take a taxi. Number 2, when my family goes on holiday, we always go by car. So maybe because, where you're traveling to is in another, maybe you're going up to the mountains or just for a very short holiday. So we always go by car because the distance is not very far. Okay, so we know we use the verb go to talk about by car. We say go by car. The next sentence is we have, how did you something to Moscow? We say, how did you travel? How did you travel? And then we use the preposition to talk about the place. So how did you travel to, I'm just going to put X. So that means wherever your destination, your holiday was. So how did you travel to Paris? Or how did you travel, as I said, or you could say, how did you get to? Most people, so we say most people go by, bicycle into the city. Okay, so we need to use go by bike or bicycle. So I've just put here by When it's raining, I normally travel to work on the train. So I normally travel to work by train. So the reason we have to use that preposition to is because when you're going somewhere, I normally travel to work. I normally travel to the airport, or I normally travel to the markets by, and then how, the transport. What did you use? So make sure it's I normally travel to work on the train. So I normally travel to work on the train. Let's take. So we have a phrase here, let's take the bus. So if you're using let's, that means let's take the bus. So when we make a suggestion, we could say let's do something. Let's take the bus. Let's take the train. It's the same as saying let's go on a holiday. Let's that means that I'm talking about me and someone else. Let's take the bus. We know we have to use the verb take when we talk about taxi, Uber, or bus. We take a bus. Okay, so you just got to remember which verb to use with which transport. So you've got this verb go by, travel by, take a. Okay, 3 different ways. So make sure you know which, if you want to talk about a bus, you take a bus. Okay, if it's in the past, you would say we took a bus to the city. We took a bus to work. Yesterday, I took a bus to work. But remember, bus, you could also use it by we traveled. We traveled by bus. Okay, so some of them, you can use them in different ways. So how do you normally travel to work? Do you normally go by car? I think most people, yes, or maybe most people go by bus, public transportation by bus. When you're on holidays, you normally take a flight, especially if you're in Australia and you want to go outside of Australia, you have to take a plane. That's the only option. But if you live in Europe, you might be lucky because you can drive maybe to another country, or you can take a train to another country. But in Australia, we always need to travel by plane. We need to take a flight. And, what's your favorite way to travel? We can ask people, which way do you prefer? What transportation? Okay, so remember, this is like ways of traveling. So which transportation or which ways of traveling do you prefer? Okay, so we can get to know the ways of traveling, the ways of going from one place to another place. We call it ways of traveling. Okay, so now we're going to, before we watch a video, we're going to look at some grammar that we use when we compare. I just want to go to superlative adjectives, page 85. So I'm just going to go a bit back here because we looked at in the last lesson how to compare, places or cities using the comparative adjective. So that's when I compare 2 places. But maybe now I want to compare a place, but to many different places. We call this the superlative. So how do we do it? If you have a short adjective, so that, remember, that means that the adjective word is short, like long, tall, it's just a short word. They call it a short adjective. So you would say, for example, Sydney is the largest, maybe city in Australia at the moment with population. I think Sydney is the largest. So what we do now is we add the EST, not ER like before in the last lesson, but we add EST to the adjective. So if I said Sydney is the, what did I say, is the largest, you know, maybe city in Australia. So I'm not just comparing two different cities, but now I'm talking about one city, which is Sydney, but comparing it to many. So for example, Sydney now is the largest city in Australia. Or I could say whichever city is the largest city in the world. Or maybe I want to talk about the ocean, you know, I don't know which one, maybe the Pacific Ocean is the largest ocean in the world. So I'm not comparing two things, but one to many. So that's why we say comparing a to many. We call this superlative. Now, if you have a long adjective, that means that the adjective is just a long word. So the most beautiful, the most amazing. We can say, for example, you know, Melbourne is the most beautiful city in Australia. Or, you know, this structure is the most beautiful structure in the world. The Eiffel Tower is the most beautiful, you know, structure in the world. So you're comparing one to many. Now, if it's a long adjective, like I said, beautiful, amazing, you say the most. So you just need to add this word, the most beautiful, the most amazing, the most dangerous. Maybe you can say there's a city, you know, is the most dangerous city in the world, is the most dangerous city in the country. Now, we do have some irregular. If you want to say that a place is good, but you remember, I want to compare it to many, you say that it is the best. So, for example, you know, Adelaide is the best city in Australia. Or if it's bad, you would say worse. Adelaide is the worst city in Australia. Okay, so I'm really comparing one thing to many. So if we just have a look at number 5, what 3 letters do you add to short adjectives? EST. Number 5, what word comes before long adjective? The most. What word usually comes before a superlative adjective? The. Okay, so if we have long, that's an adjective, long. In the comparative, it would be longer with the ER, but in the superlative, it would be the longest. So number 6, the longest. So we're saying now EST, we're adding to the adjective. So longest. If I have the adjective short, shortest, I need to add EST to the adjective short, shortest. So for example, Tom is the shortest person in the class. You're not feeling well? Yeah, that's okay. See you tomorrow in class if you come. Shortest. Fast, fastest. If someone, maybe he is the fastest runner in the world. Usain Bolt is the fastest runner in the world. If something is slow, I want to say, my God, this car is the slowest, or a person could be so slow. They're the slowest person in the world. So slowest. So you can see I'm just adding the EST, longest, shortest, fastest, slowest. For number 6, if something is expensive, but I want to compare it. I want to say this is the most expensive laptop in the world, or this is the most expensive house in the neighborhood. Or this is the most expensive jewelry. If something is difficult, so these are long adjectives, I would say this is the most difficult test I've ever done. It can compared to many tests. It's the most difficult test. Or if I want to say good, I want to say this is the best holiday that I've ever been to in my whole life. Or this is the best experience. This is the best movie I have ever seen in my life. Or this is the best meal that I'm eating, the best meal. Okay, so let's practice with some sentences. Number 7, we're talking about New Year. So we're just using the superlative comparative to compare one thing to many things. And then we'll get back to talking about ways of traveling. So New Year is the most important holiday in China. That means compared to many other holidays, you've got the New Year, maybe you've got whatever other holidays is celebrated in China. New Year is the most important. Compared to many holidays in China, this one is the most important. And around 3.5 billion people leave the biggest cities in China and travel home to their families. So it's the busiest time of the year for transport. So remember, if your adjective ends in a Y, busy, you take off the Y and you add IEST, the busiest time of the year. Many university students go by train, and it's also the worst time of the year for driving on the roads. Some people go by plane because it's the fastest way to get home. It's also the most expensive because lots of tourists fly into the country at New Year. They visit the most popular places in China, such as the Great Wall. With so many people traveling in China at this time, it's the largest human migration in the world. So you could see when you're comparing in the superlative, you're saying, you know, this thing, whatever you're comparing, is in the whole world, is the most beautiful, the most expensive, is the best, is the fastest, the slowest, compared to many in the whole world. So let's check a conversation. We have number 8, a conversation with people talking about Ireland. So let's see, now we want to use the comparative or the superlative. So I want to visit Ireland in July, but I only have 10 days. What are the best places to visit? Well, Dublin is the most famous city in Ireland. So you could see we're using the most famous. So the most famous city in Ireland. That means compared to many cities. So I can say here, Dublin is the most famous city in Ireland. And of course, it's also the most popular with tourists. But I don't want to see lots of other tourists. What's The most beautiful city. So we can ask a question. We can say, what's using the W word? What's the most beautiful city in the world? Or maybe in a country, what's the most beautiful city in Ireland? Or what's the most beautiful city that you have ever been to? That means compared to all the cities that you've been to, what's the most beautiful city? In my opinion, it's Galway. The city is, so if you have a look, we are comparing two places, so we need to use the comparative. So Galway is smaller than Dublin. So we're using the comparative here because we are comparing two places, Galway and Dublin. So Galway is smaller than Dublin. Okay, so the city is smaller than Dublin. We need to use the comparative, ER. But it's next to the sea, so there are great views. How cold is it? July is the hottest. July is the hottest month. Now we used the EST, the superlative, because we're comparing it to all the months in the year. So July is the hottest month. So it's okay. What about transport? What's the best way? So this is how we can ask someone, what's the best way to travel? Now you can also say, what's the best way to get around? What's the best way to travel around this place? So someone's going to tell me, maybe it's good to take the train or you have to take a flight. You know, what's the best way to travel? Buses are the cheapest. Now we're using the superlative, the EST, because I'm comparing it to all the other ways. So buses are the cheapest. So we have the adjective cheap. We add the EST to the adjective because we're comparing buses to all the other transports. But I think a car is better. So remember that comes from the adjective good, but because I'm comparing, but a car is better than public transport. So I am using the comparative here. That comes better. It comes from the adjective good because I'm comparing the car to public transport. So two things I'm comparing. So make sure you know that this is the comparative. So remember, we've got two ways that we can compare, the comparative and the superlative. So if you have a look again, let's have a look again at the rules. We have the comparative and we have the superlative. So the comparative means I am comparing two things, A and B. But the superlative, I'm comparing A to many. All you have to remember, the comparative has the ER then. The superlative has the adjective EST. For the long adjective in the comparative, you say more, adjective then. But in the superlative, you say the most, adjective. And you remember, better is the comparative, best is the superlative, worst is the comparative, sorry, worse, and worst is the superlative. Okay, so we're comparing places, we're comparing types of transport, we're comparing food, we're comparing clothes, we're comparing people. I mean, you can compare anything by using your adjective. And are you comparing two things or one thing to many? That's what you need to think. So before we watch a video, let's have a look at the speaking part. So you're going to speak, but you're going to write it out first. So tell us about a country you know well. So I'm going to give you a country, so don't write. You're going to imagine that you know this country well, just so that you could practice speaking about a place. So let's have a read some of these countries. So when you tell us about a place that you know well, you want to compare. You want to tell us what's the most famous city in this place? What's the oldest city in this country? What's the most beautiful place or the most popular place where tourists can visit? Or the best place to visit? Or what's the hottest month? What's the coldest month? What's the cheapest way to travel? Okay, so you're only picking one country, but you're talking about comparing it in general with, like I said, the most famous city, the most cheapest way to travel. So let's read some examples and then you'll see how you can talk about a place that you know well, a country that you visited, that you spent some time there, and how do you compare it? So Eloise says Macedonia. This is the country that she is talking about. Macedonia, the most famous city and capital of Macedonia is Skopje. The oldest city is Virginia, which is located near Greece. The most beautiful place and popular place for tourists is Macedonia, St. Hovan Canyo Church, a Macedonian Orthodox church situated on the cliff above Canyo Beach. With the beautiful view of Lake Ohrid, to get there, you need to follow a trail through the forest. The hottest month is from June to September, and the coldest month is January. The cheapest way to travel is by plane from Portugal, which takes around 9 hours. So that was really good. She gave us a lot of information about Macedonia. And she has a nice image there as well that we can see. Okay, so now let's have a look at another example from Yaneth. So Yaneth is talking about Colombia. She says, hello, everyone. Colombia is the most beautiful country due to its coasts on the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. It is the most captivating country for its delicious food and variety of local dishes. So I'll just change these words just to make it a little bit more casual conversation. So she should say local dishes and its delicious food and variety of local dishes. It is the most famous country for its carnivals and traditional festivals. In different cities, such as the Barranquilla carnivals, the flower fair in Medellin, the parades in the Cauca Valley, etc., which are the most popular parties for tourists. So I hope you could see the superlative, the most popular. The best place to visit is the National Natural Park, Tayrona, situated or located in Santa Marta, Magdalena, which is the regional capital that stands out for being the oldest city in Colombia and the second oldest in South America. Regarding Colombia's climate, its hottest months are between May and September, and the coldest months are between November and February. The most easiest way to travel in Colombia is by public transportation, such as buses. So that's good. That's Colombia. So Sebastian is talking about Romania. So we have an image of Romania, and Sebastian says, "Hi everyone, let's talk about Romania." Romania is the home of the movie Dracula. They have one of the largest, so can you see that adjective, large? And then we add the EST, the largest hot water parks in Europe, and is home to one of the narrowest streets in Europe. It has some of the most incredible castles in the world. Romania has the cheapest public transport and the largest Gothic church in Europe. In its capital, Bucharest, you can find the heaviest building in the world. Okay, that's very interesting information about Romania. Okay, Shirley is talking about Portugal. So this is her image of Portugal. And she says, "Hi, everyone, and welcome to Portugal." Portugal has some of the most stunning coastlines, a profoundly rich historical history, amazing wines, great flamenco music, and some of the most delicious seafood cuisine. Lisbon is the capital of Portugal and is also the most popular city among tourists. It is renowned for its blend of historic charm, vibrant culture, and breathtaking views. This makes it one of the most alluring cities in Portugal. So really good, Portugal. Venezuela. So Juanita said, "Hi guys, we are going to tell you about Venezuela. It has the highest waterfall in the world and is the cheapest country in Latin America. Venezuela has more oil reserves than other countries. In the 60s, Venezuela was known as the happiest country in the world." Okay, so you could see that adjective, happy, and because she's comparing it, it's the happiest country in the world compared to many, many other countries. Okay, Angeli is talking about Estonia. And she says, "Hello, everyone. I will talk about Estonia. Estonia is a country in Europe with the most stunning natural landscapes and the most delicious food. It has lush forests, beautiful coasts, and tranquil islands that are the most picturesque. Its cuisine, influenced by different cultures, offers the tastiest stews, smoked sausages, rye bread, and fresh fish from the Baltic Sea. Additionally, Estonia's berries and mushroom are the most delicious. In summary, Estonia is the perfect place where you'll find the most incredible landscapes and the most delicious food." Okay, so can you see that comparative adjective, superlative? We're going to go to Hungary. So the most famous city in Hungary is Budapest, which is known for its stunning architecture, history, and culture. Szombathely is the oldest city in Hungary. It was founded in 45 AD. One of the most beautiful places in Hungary is Lake Balaton, located 80 kilometers south of Budapest. Balaton Lake is known to be the largest lake in Europe. The best place to visit in Hungary is Győr, where you will find a few hundred buildings that are considered monuments. You can also walk through the charming old town. The month of January is the coldest month in the country. It can go as low as minus 1.6 degrees Celsius, while in July, the hottest month has an average of 21 degrees. Hi everyone, I'd like to introduce Croatia. The oldest city in Croatia is Zadar. There are many beautiful cities in which each city has its unique charm and culture. To name a few, Dobrović, Pula, Arena, Zadar, Seaside, and so on. The most popular city is Dobrović, which has one of the World Cultural Heritage Sites. With beautiful beaches, ancient buildings, and a long history of cultural heritage, you can enjoy the spectacular scenery of Dobrović and taste the local cuisine. The hottest temperature in Dobrović is in October and the coldest in July. It is strongly recommended to buy Dobrović Pass, which is the cheapest and cost-effective way to get around. So Javiera writes about Armenia. Armenia is seen as one of the oldest nations on earth. The most popular place to visit for tourists is Yerevan, which is a highly developed city with modern architecture, cultural centers, museums, and monuments. The best time of the year to visit Armenia are from early June to early September and from late December to mid-January. The south of Armenia is undoubtedly the most intense part of the country. There are two of the most important monasteries, natural jewels, and cities with historical sites of great importance. One of the most surprising things about this country is the amount of heritage that it has for such a small country. And Fo writes about Latvia, a country called Latvia. So he says, Riga is the capital of Latvia and the largest city among all the Baltic countries. With a population of almost 700,000, Riga is the largest city in the Baltic states, one of the largest cities in Northern Europe, and home to more than a third of Latvia's population. Riga is an important financial, commercial, port, industrial, and cultural center of the Baltic region. Riga is located on the banks of the Dobrava River, not far from the Gulf of Riga. The city of Riga covers an area of 307.17 square kilometers and is 10 meters above sea level on a flat, sandy plain. Riga's oldest town center has been declared a World Heritage Site, and the city is famous for its Art Nouveau architecture comparable to Vienna or St. Petersburg. Okay, so now you are able to tell us about a country you know well. And as I said, talk about what's the most famous city in it. What's the oldest city? What's the hottest month? The coldest month? The best way to travel around it? What are the most beautiful places? So you need to use your adjectives when you talk about a place. But when you compare, you have to use your superlative adjectives or your comparative adjectives. So we looked at those rules earlier in the lesson. Okay, so now you have the confidence to tell someone about the country that you visited and just, you know, with great details, especially if you talk about the things that we talked about. That's a very great way to speak about a place that you visited. Okay, so that was ways of traveling and also